Good afternoon, and thanks for having us in. A Minnesota man is behind bars in connection with a drug bust in Brookings. Police say on Wednesday, officers stopped a vehicle along I-29. That's where authorities say they found meth, crack cocaine, and heroin. Officers say there was also a 2-year-old child in the vehicle. 59-year-old Baron Bernadise was arrested on several drug charges. Investigators say he has several drug arrests listed on his criminal history. A new federal report shows the time is shrinking between when someone buys a gun and when it is recovered from a crime scene. It also documents a spike in the use of conversion devices that make a semi-automatic gun fire like a machine gun. There are also more seizures of so-called ghost guns. This is the most expansive federal report in over 2 decades on guns and crime. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives says this data could help police and lawmakers reduce gun violence. The death of Tyre Nichols has put renewed pressure on the Biden administration to pass the stalled George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. The president and vice president are planning to meet later today with members of the Congressional Black Caucus to get the legislation back on track. Nicole D'Antonio reports from Capitol Hill.
At the National Prayer Breakfast Thursday, President Biden referenced Tyre Nichols and his family.
Justice is long overdue.
Wednesday in Memphis, Vice President Kamala Harris made an impassioned plea at Nichols' funeral for restarting negotiations on federal police reform. Congress started work on a bill after the death of George Floyd in police custody, but it's been stalled for a year and a half.
We demand that Congress pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Joe Biden will sign it.
The legislation aimed to, among other things, limit unnecessary use of force, restrict the use of no-knock warrants and chokeholds, and limit qualified immunity, which shields officers from many potential civil lawsuits. That last measure met resistance from Senate Republicans. The president and vice president are meeting this afternoon with the Congressional Black Caucus to figure out how to make progress on the bill. But with Republicans now controlling the House, the legislation faces a steep uphill climb.
I don't know that there's any law that can stop that evil that we saw.
With the Floyd bill stuck, President Biden signed an executive order on police reform for federal law enforcement last May, and more executive action may be on the table. But the White House concedes there is no substitute for federal legislation. Nicole D'Antonio, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
The parents of Tyre Nichols will attend President Biden's State of the Union address next week as guests of the Congressional Black Caucus. Turning to weather, it's really cold now, but we have a notable spike in the temperatures coming soon, don't we, Brian?
Yes, we do. It's going to be a nicer weekend. We're going to get to those details coming up. But first today, we're going to deal with the colder winds out of the north. And take a look at the midday temperature map right now. We have 0 in Aberdeen, 1 below in Brookings, 4 below 0 in Watertown. Now, in western South Dakota, it's not quite as cold, but still a lot colder than it has been. 16 now in Rapid. Custer is still holding at 30 at this hour. Now, as we look at the conditions in Sioux Falls, you'll see there a couple of items. First of all, the wind is out of the north at 15. And that wind in the countryside has been enough to blow and drift some snow. And I encountered that in the rural areas just south of Sioux Falls here late this morning. So I'm sure some of you are probably seeing some of those new finger drifts on those rural roads. Be aware of that. There's your wind chill map, minus 25 in Watertown, minus 29 Ortonville, and western South Dakota not quite as cold. We do have some advisories up today from Mobridge to Aberdeen, all the way circling back down through Marshall and a big chunk of southwest Minnesota. So just continue to watch for that and be aware of the conditions. North winds, there's the map on that too. 28 miles per hour in Worthington and 26 in Spencer. And I know there have been some visibility issues between Sioux Falls and the Twin Cities this morning, just due to the ongoing wind and the snow that's exposed to that. So here we go. Our forecast, we're falling through the single digits at this point across much of eastern Ketherland. We've already hit that high of 26 in Rapid City. Coming up, we get to share some good news. If you like warmer weather, we'll give you details in just a little bit.
Sounds great. Thank you, Brian. A bill banning certain kinds of gender-affirming health care for transgender minors is up for debate in the South Dakota House today. HB 1080 prohibits doctors from prescribing puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones and bans genital surgery. Earlier testimony on the bill featured doctors on both sides, as well as a transgender teen that the bill would directly affect. We have additional information on the bill and its impact on transgender health care in a KELLLAND.com original by Jasmine Jackson. Another proposal for a tax cut is moving forward in the South Dakota legislature. The bill would exempt the first $100,000 of assessed home value from the statewide general school levy. Supporters say the tax cut would save homeowners about $350. Sponsors of the proposal say the state aid formula schools would be adjusted to cover the amount. The Legislative Research Council is preparing an official estimate. Summit Carbon Solutions says Iowa landowners have signed easement agreements for 2/3 of the project's route. Their proposed CO2 pipeline has stirred controversy in several states, including South Dakota, Iowa, and North Dakota. Landowners have been outspoken about their safety and other concerns. Others have agreed to allow the pipeline to be installed. The project would capture carbon dioxide at ethanol plants and carry it through a 2,000-mile pipeline system to be buried in North Dakota. The National Music Museum in Vermillion is celebrating 50 years of preserving music history. The museum was incepted in 1973 on the University of South Dakota after Arnie B. Larson agreed to give his collections of over 2,000 instruments to the university. Since then, it's grown to be one of the largest collections in the world with roughly 14,000 instruments.
It's one of the best instrument collections in the world. It's up there with collections like Paris or Brussels, Copenhagen, all these collections, and on par with anything else in the States, New York or Washington or Boston. The collection is right up there with any other collection in the world.
In tonight's Eye on KELLLAND, Lauren Solik takes a look at how this collection has created a world-renowned museum in small-town Vermillion. Well, the 2023 downtown Sioux Falls Burger Battle winner has been announced. Drum roll, and the winner is Crawford's. The restaurant sold more than 47,000 burgers during the competition. Crawford's joins the ranks of Pop Woody's and Chef Lance's as winners of the Burger Battle. Coming up tonight on KELLLAND News, Sarah McDonald talks with the restaurant's owners about the honor.